And let's continue today on the same topic as last week, which is about spiritual friends, the importance of having such friends, and the importance of being such a spiritual friend to others. And we had talked about Yogananda ji, how he had spiritual mentors, spiritual friends, and of course spiritual students. And how before meeting his own guru, he would visit different saints. And the question comes up here is that he also said how he was born in this lifetime, Yogananda ji, already fully liberated, a self-realized avatar. And so he really didn't need to visit other saints for inspiration. And one wonders just, who was being inspired by whom in those meetings. Perhaps it was a little bit of both. And also, Master didn't need to meditate, and yet he meditated long hours and put a great deal of energy into his spiritual practice as an example for all of us, to show us what kind of energy is needed, what we need to put out to get results. And for instance, when as a boy, he and a companion meditated all night long with the hope of seeing a vision of Lord Krishna. And then finally at dawn, sitting meditating in Guruji's attic meditation room in the family home in Calcutta, they both had this vision of Lord Krishna. And this is the kind of example that he would give over and over of just what was needed on the spiritual path. It reminds me also of Sri Ramakrishna, how he would practice the sadhanas of different paths of yoga, not because he needed to, but to show us that each path was valid, and how he would practice the practices, the rituals and sadhanas of different religions, of Christianity, of Islam, also to show us that they all lead us towards that same divine goal. And this is what the great saints, the avatars, do, to show us the way, little by little. And as I mentioned earlier also, Swamiji was his beginning, before he met his guru, was not like this. He really had no spiritual friends or mentors the way that Yogananda ji did. And but once he met his guru, that was the inspiration that he needed, and also the sense of comfort. He would talk about his guru embodying both mother and father in a divine sense. And then after the passing of his guru, Swamiji gained inspiration from Master's successor, Rajarsi Janakananda, whom he called his spiritual successor. And Swamiji talks about Rajarsi taking on more and more as time went on after the passing of Master, taking on Master's consciousness. It seemed like he was becoming master in spirit. But he was around only another 3 years. And then in 1955, Rajasi left the body. And Rajasi was also made Master made him the president of the society, Self-Realization Fellowship. With his passing, then the others elected Dayamata as the president of SRF. And Dr. Lewis, Master's first disciple in America, he was the vice president of the society. And then just 5 years after that, Dr. Lewis left his body, and Swamiji was made the vice president of the society. And in 1962, when Swamiji was put out of SRF, he was again alone outwardly, in the sense of not having contact with fellow disciples. And it was very interesting because for a number of years he had to draw on inspiration from his guru only inwardly. He didn't have any reinforcements outwardly around him, encouragement around him. And what it did is he, from a potential weakness, he turned it into a strength, because being able to draw on his guru mentally, he put all of his energy into attuning to Master's consciousness and drawing that consciousness into his own, drawing on Master for inspiration. And so many examples in Swamiji's life, really every day of his life after that, there were examples of how he drew on his guru's consciousness for inspiration. I remember in Gurgaon when he wrote the book, The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita, that was really Master's commentaries on the Gita, as remembered by Swamiji. And Master blessed Swamiji with this incredible memory, that he remembered conversations with Master, word for word. You know, when he had those conversations back in 1948 to 1952, and his book, The New Path, The Essence of Self-Realization, Conversations with Yogananda, had many of these conversations, and the same words, the same thoughts that Master conveyed to him all of those years ago, he was able to reproduce. And more difficultly, he was able to reproduce his guru's thoughts on his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. But he did not spend years and years remembering and perfecting this. It was only in a matter of weeks, and this Gita is one of the deepest and the longest books, and yet it's like as fast as he could write, the inspiration came to him. And usually with Swamiji's writings, usually he would go over them many times, polishing them, editing them, getting the thoughts very clear. But with this Essence of the Bhagavad Gita, it took almost none of that. It's like the words came out almost perfectly as he put them on paper. And they needed very little editing after that by him. And I think that I know, speaking of myself, if I were, let's say I were Swamiji in his shoes, and let's say I remained in Master's ashram, I was surrounded with brother disciples, I was surrounded with memories of the Guru. It's like, I think I wouldn't have much impetus to draw inwardly so strongly as much as Swamiji did, to draw that inspiration inwardly, because there were all these pleasant memories outwardly that would be an inspiration. And so too we should look at our own lives, that what is given to us or not given to us is a blessing. That I remember many times at our retreat in California, the Ananda retreat there, that people would come to visit and feel so inspired. And sometimes they would stay for a month or 2 months, and they would think about spending the rest of their lives there. And then what would happen in many cases is, not all, but certainly in some, is that after a while they would become a little bit spiritually lazy, you might say. They were not trying quite so hard because they were in such a spiritual environment. They didn't have to try. For them to feel good, they just had to be there. That was enough. And what was happening? They weren't growing as much. For those particular people, for them to go live in a city, have a busy life, a busy work life and home life, that would give them the impetus to draw their inspiration from within. They had to work harder. They had to put out energy to maintain their peace of mind. And so we shouldn't judge ourselves or judge our situations, that rather take whatever situation God has planted us in. He means for us to bloom in that environment. And it's for us to make the very best of that environment that we can. And there was, speaking of Swamiji, there was one person that he drew a great deal of inspiration from after the passing of his guru. And that person was Anandamoyi Ma. And when Swamiji came to India in 1958, and he lived here for most of 4 years until 1962, he would visit Anandamoyi Ma in different cities and spend longer periods of time with her. And the relationship became a very close one, and a great inner inspiration to him. And he describes that here. And it was very interesting that she was not his guru. She didn't give him instruction. And she also respected very much the role that Master had as Swamiji's guru. And within that context, they were able to become, Swamiji and Anandamoyi Ma were able to become very close. And Swamiji says this about the relationship. Anandamoyi Ma occupies a more than special place in my heart. I see her as the Divine Mother herself. Through her, next to Master, I have received the greatest blessings in my life. Indeed, with her, I was able to have the relationship that my greenness on the path never permitted me to have with Master during his lifetime. It was a relationship which, far from taking me from my Guru, served to deepen my relationship also with him. Swamiji explains that when he was with his Guru, he was very young, just 22 years old, and also brand new to the path. He said he sort of related to Master with awe, that there wasn't a casual, informal give and take on in every way. It was more that Swamiji, there was a little bit of distance there. And later with Anandamayi Ma, Swamiji was much more confident and secure in himself spiritually, and was able to have a more relaxed relationship than he could with his own Guru. Not a deeper relationship, but outwardly a more relaxed one. And Swamiji tells a story, a couple of statements about Ma. I had brought a scarf to give her. She asked me to put it around her shoulders. When I had done so, she repeated 10 times, solemnly, I dwell in your heart. She said, this is not a new relationship. It is eternal. And I said, I know. I was thinking both in the human sense and of her as a manifestation of Divine Mother. One time, Anandamayi Ma said, many thousands have come to this body. None have attracted me as you have. And then to other devotees, she once said, here is a lotus in a pond. Many frogs sit under the lotus, croaking. Then a bee flies in, takes the honey, and flies away. Kriyananda is that bee. And it was interesting that here was Swamiji, not even her disciple. In thinking of this story, I was looking at my my bookshelf, particularly for this one book, that Swamiji describes his visit to India in 1972, just a couple of months after I first came to live at Ananda village. And this little book, which was published then, was called Letters from India. And on the cover are a picture of some of the saints that Swamiji visited on that time in India. Some of them returning visits that they had made to Ananda village. For instance, Swami Chidananda of the Divine Life Society, the disciple of Swami Shivananda, and Swami Muktananda. There's also Anandamayi Ma and Satya Sai Baba, whom Swamiji visited. And then I was very touched to open the book and find that in Swamiji's handwriting, it says, to Keshava, with love, Swami Kriyananda, and it was December 25th, 1973. So it was Christmas 1973, the first Christmas that I spent with Swamiji, that he gave this as a gift. And so I'm needing to leave you now. But as I say, if you have any questions or comments anytime, please feel free to leave a message in the chat box or the comment box. And I look forward to joining you again next week. Thank you for joining.